UCLA's exit to the Big Ten, of course, profitable for the football program and the school at large, but there may be a penalty to pay. That to be determined. Of course, the UC Board of Regents has their say, and their recommendation is in. We got Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football to help us break it all down. Tony, how you doing today?
Mark, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. So, of course, UCLA, unlike USC, is a private school as part of the California educational system, is tied to the UC Board of Regents. And so my understanding is that back in 1991, there was a decision made that these schools could act autonomously, however, that they had to report their decisions back to the Board of Regents. And that's basically what they're standing on, to try to receive some compensation for the impact on Cal Berkeley in particular, because of now the demise of the Pac-12 and UCLA's part in that. And the recommendation coming in from UC Berkeley President Michael Drake is a $10 million compensation annually for 6 years.
Yeah, going back to that memo that you referred to, because you're right, that's the basis of where all of this starts. It really allowed the schools within the UC system to operate their departments independently. In other words, the UC Board of Regents is not going to maintain oversight over the athletic department or the business school or the School of Liberal Arts or any of this. And so within that, UCLA did what they did in making the agreement to leave the Pac-12 when the TV contract was up and move over to the Big Ten. Now, that having been said, we saw when that happened, the UC Board of Regents trying to have some input, have some say. Technically, legally, the governor of the state of California, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan, is the chairman of the board of directors. So Gavin Newsom tried to have his say to keep UCLA. Technically, there was an 11-4 vote to allow UCLA to go. It was an advisory vote. UCLA was going no matter what. Our sources had told us they were prepared that if the board really did try to stop them, there was going to be a restraint of trade and a tortious interference lawsuit, because UCLA already now had this established contract, signed, executed contract with the Big Ten at this point. So at that time, there was a recommendation that UCLA give some of this newfound money to Cal, to UC Berkeley, because of the damage done with UCLA, USC, but as you point out, them being a private school doesn't matter as much, that there was financial damage being done to Cal. Mind you, UCLA and USC were the first two to leave. Colorado was the next school to leave the Pac-12. And then, of course, there was the tidal wave after that. And now we're down to the Pac-2. But there was a range given at the time, somewhere between $2 and $10 million. Now, UCLA never agreed to make the payment. And again, this was an advisory position from the UC Board of Regents. So last week, we got hit with, significantly different headlines, depending upon which media outlet you wanted to refer to. Ben Bolch of the LA Times, who has covered UCLA for, probably about 15 years, correctly reported that the president of the board wrote an opinion letter recommending that the board mandate UCLA pay $10 million per year for 6 years to Cal. There was another headline from another outlet with a West Coast reporter who had this splashy headline, I guess you would call it, that said, UC Board of Regents slaps UCLA with, $60 million penalty. Well, nobody got slapped with anything yet. The UC Board of Regents is scheduled to meet this coming week, Tuesday through Thursday. It was an already scheduled meeting. This was already on the books for a variety of other topics. This has now been added to the agenda for the week, an assessment on what UCLA should pay. And again, the president of the Board of Regents recommended that UCLA pay the maximum $10 million. Now, here's where it gets a little gray. We don't know that the Board of Regents actually has the authority to mandate that penalty. At Last Word, we have gone through mounds and mounds of paperwork to see what the UC Board of Regents authority is, because they would have to assess it to the school as a whole, not the athletic department, because they currently still have no authority over the athletic department. The memo, which you opened the show with, is still in effect. At some point, I'm sure they're going to rescind it, undo it, redo it, whatever the case may be. But as we sit here today having this conversation, it is still in effect. So they don't really have the ability to fine the athletic department. But the athletic department is the one that's getting all the new TV revenue from the Big Ten and the playoff money and whatever other postseason revenue they're going to get. So where does the authority to do this lie? We're actually not sure there is any.
Tony Siracusa, Last Word on College Football. You can take a deeper dive on this topic there at Last Word on College Football. And of course, as we enter the summer months, get yourself set for college football starting in late August. So, Tony, the crux of the matter is what you just addressed to me, and of course, what we opened with in 1991, and then it's the understanding of the UC Regents, and their best defense, as I understand it, is that these type of decisions need to be communicated, and if they're not communicated, then I don't know if there's something stipulated that they have the right or the authority to then respond to that in some authoritative way.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a good point, and the communication from UCLA to the UC Board of Regents. The UC Board of Regents found out about UCLA's departure from the Pac-12 roughly around the same time as everybody else did, not before. And if it was before, it was hours before, not days or weeks before. And it was because there was a need for a certain sense of privacy in this, getting out, as the lawyers looked at the ability to get out of the contract or see it through to the end with the Pac-12, what the other financial ramifications were. Look, UCLA had a team of attorneys go through this and what was obligated and what was not obligated. And it was with great certainty that they determined that the Board of Regents could not stop them. Now, couldn't stop them, but can they make them pay? Part of UCLA's appropriate challenge in this is you made this $2 million to $10 million range determination a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. That was at a time when the Pac-12 was starting to crumble. That was at a time when UCLA and USC were gone. Colorado had left, because remember, Colorado was the third school to leave. Rick George, the athletic director, walked out of the Pac-12 media days that year, and 48 hours later said, we're out. And then the Arizona schools and Oregon and Washington, right? So was there financial damage to Cal? Probably. Was it all UCLA's fault? Of course not. But the UC Board of Regents certainly can't go hit up the University of Washington or the Oregon Ducks for money. They've got even less authority there than they do over UCLA. But since that time, Cal has joined the ACC. Now, they're not getting a full revenue share for the first few years, but they are still going to be getting in the $30 to $35 million range, which is more than what the Pac-12 was going to get under the final proposal, the final media proposal, which was from Apple TV which was about 20 million a year, maybe 22. So you could have the 20 to 22 million you were going to get if the Pac 12, 10, 8 stayed together at the 20 to 22 million, or you're going to get the 30 million you're about to get from the ACC. You're not damaged. So this has been this has taken on the nickname of calimony. That's what everybody not on the West Coast is calling it now, calimony. This is absurd. The Cal Athletic Department has been for years a dumpster fire. It has been financially upside down. It did huge renovations to Memorial Stadium, their football stadium, and then couldn't pay off the bonds. So the school had to step in and pay off the athletic department's debt. UCLA is still sitting in $100 million worth of debt because there's a huge brick wall between the school and the athletic department, structurally, financially, administratively. And so all the school was going to do was offer the athletic department a low interest loan to help pay off the debt, but they're not going to pay off the debt for the athletic department. So there is all of this kind of up in the air, gray question area. While it sounds, excuse me, very authoritative that we're going to put this, penalty upon UCLA, there's questions as to whether they have the authority to do it. Frankly, if I'm UCLA, I ignore it. I don't pay it. I don't. You notice even through the time when the Board of Regents was trying to stop UCLA from going to the Big Ten, UCLA never came out publicly in any of this. They never issued statements, press releases. They never did behind the scenes interviews with any of the media that covers the school. It's a smart strategy. Be quiet. Just work under the surface, do what you're going to do, or don't do what you're not going to do. In this case, pay the penalty and wait and see what happens. Look, at the end of the day, I suppose since all the UC schools, whether it's UC Davis or Berkeley or UC San Diego or UCLA or any of the other ones, they get money from the state of California every year, which goes through the Board of Regents. I suppose maybe if this really comes to a standstill, the Board of Regents could withhold $10 million from UCLA state allocation every year, but they'd be withholding it from the athletic department, not the school. And again, then we go back to, do they have the authority to withhold it from the athletic department? And that is an unanswered question at this moment.
You've explained this very clearly, so even I can understand that it seems like there are two major points that the UC Board of Regents is standing on. One is that you, as a member of our community, our educational system, did not inform us, keep us alerted to your activities. However, once said school is outside of your jurisdiction, which they approved 11-4, how can you penalize a school that no longer operates under your jurisdiction and your authority? Number one. Number two is obviously the financial, which you laid out very well, that Cal has recovered about as well as it could, along with Stanford moving to the ACC. And that amount of money that they're going to be able to recoup each year is comparable to what the old Pac-12 contract, media contract was. And it's better than, as you just outlined, what was reported to be the contract that was the best option for them through Apple TV. So Cal's actually doing better financially. Now, I know that they're going to make arguments about travel costs and all the teams that are going to have to fly continually to the East Coast, and maybe there's some validity in that. But overall, the TV money far outweighs most of that, I would think.
It does. There are the travel costs, and again, with the finances at Berkeley being what they are, it won't be easy. But that's not UCLA's fault. Your financial morass that you're in the athletic department is not UCLA's fault. The ability of the Pac-12 to stay together was not a byproduct of UCLA leaving. It was a byproduct of ESPN coming to the Pac-12 when it was still 12 teams and offering roughly $35 to $38 million per year for the TV deal. And the presidents and chancellors of those universities coming back and asking for 55 million. And ESPN saying, have a good day. We're done. No, there's no sense in haggling between 35 and 55. We're not going to get there. Those are the decisions that cost Cal money. It just so happens that UCLA is the only one theoretically within reach of the UC Board of Regents. None of the other schools are. And again, theoretically within the reach. There's been no legal certification verification that we've been able to come up with that says, yes, they have the authority to fine the school. Under what rule? We've gone through the charter for the UC Board of Regents and what it is to be a member of the University of California system. There is no specific rule that they have violated other than, as you pointed out, they didn't give timely recognition to the Board of Regents of what was going to happen with the move out of the Pac-12. But you already voted your advisory vote. You already held your advisory vote to let them go at an 11-4. So you already did that. Nowhere was there an agreement to pay a penalty to do it. I will be surprised if UCLA ever actually pays it. I think if it does come to that, the Board of Regents is just going to have to work with the state to take it out of UCLA's annual allocation.
UCLA moves to the Big Ten. They are embarking, along with Oregon, Washington, and USC, into a television contract that is the best in college football. With Fox, CBS, and NBC. So that's a windfall for UCLA athletics, certainly. However, you will be able to explain much better than me what the state of the UCLA program is in athletically from a financial standpoint. It's not in a good place.
No.
So while they're going to start receiving these paychecks, this $10 million could be a decent hit to them.
It would be. The $10 million would be significant. They're going to be getting approximately $75 million a year in the TV contract going to the Big Ten. That is in addition to whatever postseason money they get, college football playoffs, March Madness, whatever, with the revenue sharing that goes along with that. UCLA has been sitting in a debt load of over $100 million for about 2 years now. Part of it was the cancellation of the Under Armour apparel contract. They sued each other. It got all in the weeds. UCLA settled for, I believe, roughly about a $20 million payout from Under Armour, most of which they have received. But still, we're in that $100 million debt range. It's probably closer to about 95 now, but hey, what's $5 million among friends, right? But with contract buyouts for coaches that were fired, with facilities upkeep, with all these other expenses, UCLA had, under Chip Kelly, UCLA football had one of the most expensive nutrition systems of any college football program in the country. I mean, it ran them a ton of money for, what was really essentially 5-star restaurant kind of food for the football team for several years. Chip Kelly and his $5, $6, $7 million a year contract are gone. They didn't have to pay Chip out to fire him, so there's some savings there. New football coach Deshaun Foster comes in at about a third of what Chip Kelly was getting paid. I would like to hope that they didn't choose him because of that, but certainly the cost savings is nice to have. There's going to be significant travel expense. Most of the UCLA teams will be taking charter travel, particularly for the East Coast games, whether it be Rutgers or Penn State or Maryland or whatever the case may be, particularly for the Olympic sports that have to stay for a weekend, whether it's a softball weekend or baseball or whatever the case may be. Those are going to be expensive. That having been said, the $75 million a year Big Ten agreement was the only way to get out of this debt that they're in. It's going to take a couple of years. It's not going to be like, oh, well, we got 75 million, in this hand, and so now we can pay this debt. It doesn't work like that because you're still accruing more debt, as the year goes on. Part of the debt was, the cost of running the football program at a time when you were averaging about 33,000 fans per game during a couple of really lean Chip Kelly years. And so the anticipation is that football will pick up. The crowds will be bigger at the Rose Bowl. Certainly the hope is that the Big Ten fans are going to travel out west to, go to a game against UCLA at the Rose Bowl. The TV revenue is better. It's going to take a couple of years, but that was really the only way to do it. Taking the $25 million, we never even got to 25, $20 to $22 million potential offer from Apple TV, frankly, was going to make things worse. It was never going to keep up with the debt accrued every year. So it was only going to make things worse for UCLA. This was the best option, was the only option. And I don't think they should be looking in the rearview mirror at any capacity, regardless of what the Board of Regents wants to tell them.
And I have yet to do a deep dive on UCLA's personnel, and we'll be doing that over the next couple months. But it appears to be probably a rough go that first season in the Big Ten.
It's going to be a rough go. They lost a lot defensively. And they lost the Murphy twins on the defensive line, and they lost Leatu Latu, who, best defensive edge rusher in the country last year. They lost a couple of defensive backs to USC in the transfer portal. So there are some blows to the current roster that need some immediate attention. Having said that, and we don't know what kind of look, I know Deshaun Foster pretty well. We communicated a lot over my time covering UCLA, and even after I moved out to North Carolina. And because Deshaun is a likable guy, I hope he does well at UCLA. I've always been of the mindset that a school like UCLA should not be on the job training for coaches. It shouldn't be your first gig. It was with Carl Durrell, didn't go so well. Basketball did it with Steve Lavin. Enough said there. But I think that Deshaun is a guy who has lived and breathed UCLA since he played there in the late 90s on the old Cade McNown teams. Been an assistant coach there for a lot of years. Wanted the job just so much. And when he got wind that he was not going to be a candidate if Chip Kelly left, he took an assistant job with the Raiders. Martin Jarman switched courses, pretty swiftly once Chip really did leave. And so you hope he does well. The recruiting activity at UCLA is night and day what it was under Chip Kelly. Chip hated recruiting. He hated doing, going and meeting the high school kids. The transfer portal was easier for him because you come to me. I don't have to go to you. You come to me and meet with me. In Chip's world, a lot of coaches do go out and visit the kids and, wherever they are in the portal. Chip did not. He hated that level of work. He hated the NIL work. He hated meeting with boosters. Deshaun is doing those things pretty much every day. So the recruiting has ramped up tremendously. Most of that does not impact this year. They did okay in the portal. They filled some gaps. You're not going to replace Leatu Latu that easily, or the Murphy twins, or some of the other guys that you lost. And you've got a tough schedule coming up. Let's be honest. You've got a really tough first year in the Big Ten. So I think a 6-6 season would look tremendous in Deshaun's first year, knowing that a lot of the commits he's got, if they can actually sign them in December, will bear fruit down the road. But you've got a potential tough first year. However, that having been said, you can feel kind of a vibe. Hey, look, they had over 30,000 people at the spring game at the Rose Bowl. That's huge for UCLA. It's Matt. I don't remember any time in more than 2 decades that they had that kind of crowd for the spring game. Chip Kelly had canceled the last 2 spring games, not because of the crowd, but because he just didn't want to do them. And then they used to hold them at Drake Stadium, which is the track stadium there, which, holds 5, 6, 7,000 people, and they'd get 1 to 2,000. So it was a huge crowd by UCLA standards. There's a atmosphere change that is going on there. You hope that it turns into more NIL money for the program to operate with, that it turns into more revenue, game day revenue, and those types of things to go with the more money that they're already going to get from the Big Ten.
Tony Siracusa, last word on college football, breaking down UCLA versus the UC Board of Regents and the Bruins football team heading into 2024. Deeper dive on the UCLA situation with the Board of Regents. Please check out Tony's work at Last Word on College Football. And actually, we'll just grab the link and we'll put it right down below us. So you can grab it right there and go directly to Tony's work on Last Word. Tony, as always, appreciate you stopping by, breaking things down for us.
Always glad to do it with you, Mark. Be well.